Japan and South Korea have been fighting over two rocks for over 100 years. There's been an ongoing territorial dispute between South Korea and Japan over the Liancourt rocks. The Liancourt rocks are a tiny group of islands located right in the middle of the ocean between Japan and South Korea, approximately 140 miles away from each country on both sides. In Korea, they're referred to as Dokdo, and in Japan, they're referred to as Takeshima. But I'm going to call them the Liancourt Rocks because that's a neutral third-party name given by French whalers, referring to this territorial dispute as fighting over rocks. May sound sardonic and reductive, but these islets are truly tiny. They have a combined area of only 46 acres, or 0.07 miles. For perspective, Central Park in New York City is 853 acres. You could probably fit these two rocks in your neighborhood if you wanted to. These islands are internationally recognized as South Korean, and South Korea administers them with their Coast Guard. But Japan claims them as well, even going as far as to include them in their official maps of Japan in textbooks. North Korea does claim these islands too, but North Korea claims all of South Korea. Yeah, I don't think I need to explain why the North Korean claim over these isn't super valid. The island does have some natural resources like fish and minerals, but it's such a small area that it's basically irrelevant. So what's so special about these islands? They seem to be important enough to be a point of contest, so is this just a case of petty nationalism where the cultural victory is more important than the rocks themselves? Or could owning these islands give either country a leg up in the Pacific? In order to accurately explain the dispute and why it even exists in the first place, we need to look at some history, because the claim to these islands is much more of a symbolic victory than a material one. South Korea uses historic Korean dynastic documents to claim these islands as Korean. Historic Korean maps and texts from the past 1,000 years show that the Liancourt rocks have been administered almost exclusively by Korea. There are some sources that go as far back to the year 500 AD that may mention these islands, but we're not entirely sure whether the mention of islands off the coast of South Korea specifically refers to these ones. So for the longest time, these islands were basically Korean. They were ran and administered by Korea, and there were some Japanese fishermen that would come during the Edo period to fish for abalone, sea lions, and seals. Records of Japanese travel to these islands start in around the 1600s. During the Edo period, the shogunate allowed a couple specific families to fish near them. Since the islands were reportedly unpopulated at the time and served as a breeding ground for sea lions, it was a gold mine for Japanese fishermen, so a lot of Japanese sealers would go to them to fish. But the territorial dispute officially started in 1905. At the time, it was the middle of the Russo-Japanese War, and in January 1905, the Japanese government claimed these islands as Japanese in order to give themselves a leg up against Russia. The government claimed that they were justified in taking these rocks because under international law, they were considered terra nullius. Terra nullius are areas of the world that have no official claim by any sovereign nation. Nowadays, we do have unclaimed territories like Bir Tawil between Egypt and Sudan, and there's also Mary Birdland in Antarctica. Terra nullius more or less is a thing of the past, but in the early 20th century, it was a big deal because everyone was scrambling for land. Everybody had empires, and everyone wanted to expand as much as they could. They were administered by Japan up until the end of World War II, where Japan ceded all of its overseas territories back to their original owners, including Korea. Today, the islands are pretty much Korean. According to the South Korean Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the first ever civilian to become a resident of these islands was a person named Choi Jung-duk, who was Korean. Today, the island has one official resident. It's a woman named Kim Sin-yeol. Her husband used to be a resident, but he died a few years back. There are some other non-civilian residents too. There's about 20 police personnel, 2 lighthouse managers, and 3 official office staff, all Korean. Despite the small size and relative nothingness that this island has, it serves as a huge tourist spot for South Koreans. In 2023, it's reported that 230 3,000 people visited these tiny islands, which was pretty incredible, not only because there isn't much here, but it's pretty difficult to get here. It's by far the most difficult place in South Korea to go to. In order to come here as a tourist, you need to take a 3-hour ferry from the city of Gangneung to Ulleungdo Island, and then take another 2-hour ferry from Ulleungdo to the Liancourt Rocks. The reason why so many Koreans go here is because of patriotism. These rocks are a source of national pride for Koreans, and even though they're difficult to get to, some people view it as an act of patriotism or pilgrimage or a civic duty. This dispute exists as a matter of Korean national identity. The rhetoric that both South Korea and Japan have over these rocks is fiercely jingoistic, almost to a comedic extent. I'll read off a quote from the Japanese Ministry of Foreign Affairs regarding these islands. Takeshima is indisputably an inherent territory of Japan in light of historical facts and based on international law. The Korean forces involved with this island, like the Dokdo Management Office and the Korean Ministry of Foreign Affairs, seem to flaunt their control over these islands as a specifically Korean victory. Official photos of tourism to this island almost always include Korean citizens holding up the Korean flag. South Korean officials vehemently declare that Japan should refute its claim of the Liancourt Rocks so that South Korea can become fully sovereign and independent from Japan. The reason why owning these islands is such a great sense of South Korean national pride is because it separates a sort of breakaway from the Japanese Empire. In the early 20th century, Korea was part of the Japanese Empire, and Korea was not treated well by the Imperial Japanese Navy. The Korean men were forced to fight in the Japanese army, and the Korean women were forced into prostitution. And a lot of modern day Korean politicians, and to an extent a part of the populace, sort of have a resentment towards Japan because of this. But despite this, Japan and South Korea do have really good relations. I don't want this to come off as South Korea and Japan are just butting heads all the time. They're on the same side of most every issue. It's just little disputes like this do come up, and they sort of throw salt into old wounds. To the Korean perspective, Japan still trying to hold on to these islands is like them trying to hold on to their old oppressive, authoritarian, brutal empire. I think it would be like if modern day Germany still claimed to own pieces of Europe that they had under the Third Reich. That's probably the best comparison I could come up with. It's very easy to look at this dispute and think, oh wow, they're just fighting over two little islands that have no resources. That's really silly. But this goes deeper than that. My original angle for this video was to poke fun at this dispute because the idea of two of the most powerful nations on Earth fighting over two little rocks sounds funny, but when you look deeper into it, even these tiny territorial disputes can have real-world effects on national identity and international relations. But I sort of felt this way, actually. When I originally wrote this video, it was supposed to be comedic, and I was gonna poke fun at the issue and make fun of Japan and Korea for fighting over such small islands, but then I did more research and I'm like, oh, wait, this is important. If you've reached this far, thank you so much for watching. I appreciate all of you. I hit 4,000 subscribers a couple days ago, which is great. So thank you everybody for that. If you want to support me directly, the best way to do it is through Patreon. So for the $1 tiers, I'd like to give a big shout out to Bowaxer, Claire Schmidt, Fake Gamer Guy, Jake Marr, and Kevin Garcia. You are the realest. Even a $1 subscription helps more than you could ever imagine, and it's really amazing. Once again, thank you everybody for watching. I will see you in the next video. Goodbye.